Serious Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said that the time of peace in Europe is over, that we are now living in pre-war times, to Europeans of Reddit. What are your thoughts on this speech? Is Europe really on the brink of war? I am Asian and is ready to face war if anything happens. Defending country is the duty of mine and my countrymen. This wars will also affect Asia. In both world wars, Europe dragged Asia and Americas into the war. Even Oceania, Australia, and all island countries near were in wars. Africa was in war. In today's era, wars in any region affect a distant region too. We have to be aware, people. Everyone wants to earn money, go to school, and live and spend time with their families. Hope there is no war situation. And I hope those people in power understand it too. Tanks over the open field that is Ukraine. Are you telling us we should fear them attempting a mass invasion against all of Europe with the only possible European assistance being Hungary and Turkey? There is nothing to fear in conventional warfare with the Russians. We should be prepared. Yes, but there's no need to fear an invasion, since they can't even get through Ukraine. If Russia has anything we should fear, it's their disinformation campaigns and ability to buy off politicians. This resembles the pre-WW conditions. Unrest and now a conflict. Nations still trying to not get involved too much out of fear for losses. Leaders unsure. People like to call that weakness, but it's part of the pattern. Somewhere the dam breaks and hell breaks loose. And then you've got a world war. Only this time it won't be world. Russia won't be defended by anyone else. As it stands right now, Europe is hoping to break Russia through supporting Ukraine, so they don't have to risk anything. If that works, no big war. If that doesn't work, big war. Russia is now behaving like Nazi Germany in the late 30s. Air testing the waters, and the less resistance they encounter, the more aggressive they become. Sadly, European leaders are making the same mistake by trying to appease and not anger Putin. They've been doing this since the war in Georgia and then throughout the Donbas conflict. The stance of the US Republicans is not helping either. Basically, we need a hard, united response to what Putin is doing now, or we are going to repeat history plus or minus a nuclear war. We are seeing the same pattern like we saw in WW1 and W2. It could, but I doubt we'll label it as W3. If a war between Europe and Russia would start, Russia would collapse the moment European and American troops enter significant Russian cities like St. Petersburg or Rostov. I doubt that apart from Belarus, any other nations would get involved. China would never want to get involved. And I also doubt any non-NATO nations apart from maybe Japan would be involved. A big war with the best would push Russia over the tipping point. Is Europe really on the brink of war? It have already been forced upon Europe. Ukraine is part of Europe. Basically, the rest of Europe is in a support role that compared to the one the US adopted initially. In WW2, it took Pearl Harbor for the US to become directly engaged in that war. I do not think we will require as direct an event for our leaders to finally move into action. After all, the calls for the civil population to ready themselves are starting to appear. This is by definition the brink of war. Yes, and the situation turned even more serious after 2008 and 2014 in particular. If you look at the Greater Black Sea region, it's where there's been a lot of conflicts happening in the last decades. Transnistria, Chechnya, Karabakh, Georgia, and now Ukraine. Sadly, neither the US nor the big EU countries are really interested in this region. To this day, there's less of a forward presence on the southern flank from NATO, even though this seems to be the direction Putin chose for expansion. Europe has been on the brink of war for quite some time. It is not very well known that the Polish, aside from their economic interests, had been quite willing to aid Ukraine in their efforts. We also had that tense moment where a missile landed in Poland. That could have been a lighting of the fuse for a big clash. Eastern European nations will, despite some having divided loyalties, eventually decide they cannot let Ukraine lose to Russia, or will feel to threaten themselves. Yes. And frankly, I wish all of NATO would hurry the fuck up and just go ahead and fully militarize and crush Russia once and for all. But I'm guessing then China and Saudi Arabia will team up with Russia aka step on Russian corpses, to try to destroy all NATO countries. T's headed there and we're just fucking wasting billions of dollars every fucking year just slowing down the inevitable, just so defense contractors can milk the most profit out of this whole situation. Not just in Europe. China is already flexing its muscles over Taiwan and in the West Philippine Sea. 5 days ago, Chinese Coast Guard collided with a PH Coast Guard vessel during a resupply mission of the former to its island inhabitants in the disputed area. NET 226,929 PH and China Coast Guard ships collide in West Philippine Sea. Ukraine's possible defeat will embolden Xi Jinping to pursue his ambitions over Southeast Asia. Let's see, after Hitler took Czechoslovakia, where did he go next? I think Tusk is keenly aware of what Putin has said and done, and what Putin is planning. Putin ain't stopping at Ukraine, so Europe must prepare. Helping Europe helps the US, Canada, and the rest of the free world. Doesn't help Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, etc. And that's the point. But virtually every MAGA decision is somehow in the best interests of Russia. Coincidentally, I'm in Germany. I don't believe there's any threat of war or conflict beyond the existing ones. I don't believe Russia wants to attack NATO or anything like that. Would they do it if they had insanely overwhelming military? Maybe. But that's not the case, and won't be. And unlike in the past, the right-wing parties are against getting mixed into further conflicts, and have no interest in expanding the existing territories. I'm deeply concerned, especially that most people in their daily lives don't seem to realize or hide it. It is already war. This uncertainty of how the US reacts, if Russia gets fucked or not, and the possibility it might end by just a nuclear blast is annoying. PCS, I don't know if I should sit down or run. When it happens, I'm confident the NATO would win. But this does not help me if artillery shells raze my city before that. With nukes in Belarus and constant shellings of Kyiv, we are at war already. With Russian-incited hybrid border warfare by Belarus, we are at war already. With Russian hybrid warfare inciting bigger farmers' protests and sowing discord here in Poland and in other EU countries, we are at war. War isn't only tanks and bombs. It's economy, info warfare, espionage, and many other things, all actively conducted by CACAPs. I think this is absolutely true. Lots of similarities with the 1940s appeasement of Hitler and failing to gear up to a war footing that didn't end well. Too low, against a backdrop of right-wing nationalism sweeping globally, and the cretin in the Kremlin with nothing to lose and absolute power, who appears to be intent on reassembling the Soviet Union. It's obviously true and history backs that up. Part of the issue is the Cold War was kept cold because there was no viable military options. The general trend of disarmament has made that not true. You also have a cadre of extremists in charge of Russia. To protect his position, Putin is surrounded by people even more extreme than he is. So, when he goes, it's just as likely to get worse, not better. I think they should all slow the fuck down, stop the cavalry. He should be delivering weapons to you. We should be giving them and training them in all they need. Instead, constantly we hear that Germany doesn't want to give this, or thinks if it's okay to give that. For real, if not for European pressure, they wouldn't give anything to Ukrainians. There's already a war in Europe since 2022, arguably, even since 2014. I'm not personally worried, as in, for my own life or anything. There are several countries between my own and Russia, and there's zero chance I get called up to serve in the military my country doesn't have active conscription. I feel for my people at EU's eastern border though, who have to live under a more direct threat. I think it could be the rising conflict between Russia and Ukraine goes deeper than that. Communist nations are militarizing everywhere, with North Korea having nuclear warheads and China building a super-fast train line to Taiwan. I think a land they've been after for ages. It goes deeper than Europe. From my perspective, we're on the brink of another world war, perhaps the last war ever. Is weak and is about to lose in Ukraine. Their military is pathetic to Russia is actually so strong and scary and dangerous that it is single-handedly going to fight the entirety of Europe. Even more hilarious how everybody is seemingly lapping up this enemy is both strong and weak. Nonsense propaganda without question. While Vladimir Putin is a horrible person, he isn't suicidal. If he attacked Poland, he attacks all of NATO by default. 3 NATO countries have nuclear weapons and all of them have a military. Russia is failing to invade Ukraine as planned and it's really hurt his country. He's only attacked Ukraine because he could get away with it. If he attacked NATO, Russia would be no more. Yes, I think we are heading that way. It seems like Europe world has to have a serious big war at least once every 100 years. Seems like a natural law that maybe we have to understand what we really stand for again. I find it a bit comforting to read the unison agreement across the continent that we are in this together. Also, without the US, we will hold our own. Yes, look at history. What worries me the most is we are on the brink of war, and the UK military also my God has never looked as weak as this. We are absolutely beyond fucked if we have to fight without the full strength of NATO. And the moral is at an all-time low too, given how our government treats us on top of the staggering lack of funding. Was a piece I seen about Russia's economy, and how it is benefiting short-term from the switch to a wartime economy focus on rearmament, but that it wouldn't be sustainable in the medium to long term. I couldn't help but notice the parallels between this and the German economy in the 30s, and we all know how that went.